Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're going to be taking a little trip to a hidden world inside you. One you might not think about much, but trust me, it's way more powerful than people realize.
Exactly. We're talking about the thyroid.
Okay.
That tiny butterfly-shaped gland in your neck.
Uh,
Don't let the size fool you, though. This
Yeah,
little
you-
guy is pulling strings you wouldn't believe.
okay, I'm intrigued. The document we have here describes it as a control center for your metabolism.
Uh,
But what does that even mean for, like, my day-to-day life?
It means the thyroid is basically the conductor of your body's orchestra. Everything from how much energy you have to your heart rate to even how your body grows and develops all comes back to the thyroid. It's about as essential as it gets.
Wow, that's a heavy-duty job for something most people probably couldn't even point to on an anatomy chart. And speaking of heavy duty, the document mentions these two hormones the thyroid pumps out,
Right.
C3 and T4. It actually calls T3 the speedy one, which, I don't know, I feel like I relate to that.
Well, it's a fitting nickname. You can think of T3 as that quick-acting messenger, zipping around your body, delivering instructions. T4, on the other hand, it's more like a reserve force, always there, ready to step in when needed.
Okay, so we've got the speedy one and the reserve team. Got it. But what makes these hormones tick? What do they need to do their job right?
Well, here's a fun fact that might make you rethink your next grocery run. Both T3 and T4 rely on iodine. Without it, your thyroid is basically working with its hands tied.
So that seaweed salad at the sushi place isn't just a trendy side dish. I'm actually doing my thyroid a favor.
Exactly. It's a great natural source of iodine. And, it's amazing how something as simple as what you eat can have such a huge impact on this tiny gland, and by extension, your entire body.
That's a great point. It's like this whole hidden world we don't think about, but it's running the show behind the scenes.
It really is. And unfortunately, like with any well-oiled machine, sometimes things can go wrong.
That's where we get into things like hypothyroidism, right?
Oh.
The document paints a bit of a sleepy snail picture, which, honestly, some mornings I vibe with.
But when it comes to your thyroid, sleepy snail isn't exactly a compliment. It basically means your thyroid is slowed down and it's not producing enough of those vital hormones we were talking about.
So what causes this slowdown? Is it just a matter of getting older, or are there other things at play?
Age can play a role, but there are other culprits too. The most common, at least in the developed world, is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Basically, it's an autoimmune condition where your body mistakenly attacks the thyroid, leading to lower hormone production.
So your own immune system turns against you.
Yeah.
That's rough. What are some signs that your inner sleepy snail might be to blame for how you're feeling?
Well, that's the tricky part. The symptoms can be really subtle and easily mistaken for something else. Fatigue is a big one, which, let's be honest, who hasn't felt tired these days? But when it's persistent and paired with things like unexplained weight gain, feeling cold all the time, even constipation, those can all be red flags.
It's like your body is stuck on low power mode, right? Not exactly the recipe for a productive day. So if someone's listening to this starting to feel a little too seen right now, what should they do?
The good news is diagnosing hypothyroidism is usually pretty straightforward. A simple blood test that checks your TSH levels can give doctors a good indication. TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, is like a messenger from your brain to your thyroid.
So if your TSH is high, it means your brain is sending out a ton of get-to-work signals. But the thyroid isn't getting the message, or it's just not able to keep up.
You got it. It's like your thyroid's check engine light is on, and it's time to investigate a little further.
This is all making so much sense. I'm starting to realize my thyroid might need more attention than I've been giving it.
So we've talked about the sleepy snail scenario, but what about the opposite? What happens when your thyroid goes into overdrive?
That, my friend, is hyperthyroidism, and it's a whole other ballgame. If hypothyroidism is the sleepy snail, then hyperthyroidism is like your thyroid hit the gas pedal and forgot where the brake was. Okay, I'm getting some serious lead foot vibes here.
Yeah.
But seriously, what's going on in the body when that happens?
Essentially, it's like the speedy T3 hormone we talked about is running the show and everything is in overdrive. Your metabolism is cranked up. Your heart might race. You might feel warm. Even when it's chilly, it's like your body's internal thermostat is broken.
The document mentions Graves' disease as the most common culprit behind this thyroid speed demon. What can you tell us about that?
Graves' disease is another autoimmune condition.
Oh, wow.
But instead of slowing the thyroid down, it makes it overproduce hormones.
Ah.
It's like your immune system accidentally stepped on the gas pedal and can't take its foot off.
So in both cases, it's the immune system causing chaos. just in very different ways. You got to wonder what the evolutionary advantages of having a runaway immune system attacking your thyroid. Anyway, back to hyperthyroidism. What are some of the telltale signs?
Well, you might experience unexplained weight loss even with a good appetite because your metabolism is burning through everything you eat. Insomnia and anxiety are common too because your whole system is amped up. And here's an interesting one. Some people with Graves' disease develop bulging eyes.
Oh, right. The document mentioned that something about the tissues behind the eyes getting inflamed.
Right.
It sounds kind of freaky, to be honest.
It can be, and it's definitely something you'd want to get checked out by a doctor right away. But remember, both hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism are treatable conditions.
Okay.
Medication can help regulate hormone levels, and some people find relief through lifestyle changes too.
It's reassuring to know there are ways to manage it, but I imagine it can take some time to find the right treatment plan. Speaking of things that need attention, we've got to talk about those lumps and bumps that can crop up in the thyroid. The document calls them nodules, and I'll be honest, the whole finding a surprise pebble in a bag of beans analogy kind of freaked me out.
I can see why. But the good news is that most thyroid nodules are benign, basically. Harmless little growths that don't cause any trouble. It's like finding an extra blueberry in your muffin, a little surprising, but nothing to worry about.
Okay, that's a much better analogy.
Yeah.
But how do you even know if you have a nodule in the first place? They're pretty small, right?
They can be, but sometimes they're large enough to feel, or a doctor might spot one during a routine exam. But often they're found incidentally during imaging tests for something else entirely.
So you're just going about your life, minding your own business, and bam, surprise pebble. But seriously, if you do find one, what happens next? Do you need to get it removed just in case?
Not necessarily. The first step is usually an ultrasound, which gives doctors a clearer picture of the nodule's size, shape, and location. And if there are any red flags, like certain features that make it look suspicious, then they might recommend a fine needle aspiration biopsy.
That sounds a lot scarier than it probably is, right? What exactly are they looking for in a biopsy?
They're checking to see if the cells inside the nodule are cancerous or not. And while any mention of cancer can be scary, it's important to remember that thyroid cancer is relatively rare. And even if it is found, most types are highly treatable, especially when detected early.
So it's all about getting the information and then making informed decisions with your doctor.
Right.
Knowledge is power, right? Now, speaking of thyroid abnormalities, the document also mentions goiters, which, to be honest, I always thought was an old-timey word for something totally different.
It does sound like it should be a character in a Dickens novel, doesn't it? But actually, a goiter is simply an enlarged thyroid gland. It's not a disease in itself, but rather a symptom of some other underlying issue.
So it's like the thyroid's way of saying, hey, something's up here, pay attention.
Exactly. Sometimes goiters are caused by iodine deficiency, which is why iodized salt became so important. Other times they're linked to hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism.
Right.
And in some cases, they're caused by nodules or growths within the thyroid.
I'm guessing the treatment for a goiter depends on what's causing it.
You got it. Sometimes medication or radioactive iodine therapy can shrink the goiter.
Okay.
Other times, surgery might be needed to remove part or all of the thyroid. It really depends on the individual case.
This is also fascinating and a little overwhelming, to be honest. We've covered a lot of ground here today. From tiny hormones to runaway immune systems to surprise pebbles and oversized butterflies. It's amazing how much is going on in this one little gland. But there's one more topic we need to address, and I know it's one that many people are curious and maybe a little afraid to hear about: thyroid cancer. Okay, deep divers, let's dive into those deeper waters and talk about thyroid cancer. I think it's safe to say that hearing the C word can really, stop you in your tracks, even when we're talking about a gland many people don't think about until something goes wrong.
You're right, it's a loaded word, but here's the thing. Thyroid cancer is not a one-size-fits-all diagnosis. There are different types, each with its own story, its own level of seriousness. And the good news, especially for our listeners today, is that most types of thyroid cancer are highly treatable.
That's definitely reassuring to hear. So where do we even start unpacking this? The document mentions something called papillary carcinoma as the most common type. What can you tell us about that?
Papillary carcinoma is actually where most thyroid cancers start. Think of it like this. Imagine the thyroid gland is like a tree. The trunk of the tree is where things are generally fine, but sometimes little branches sprout off, and those branches can be a little more unpredictable. That's kind of like papillary carcinoma. It tends to grow slowly and stay put.
Okay, so it's not necessarily spreading like wildfire throughout the body.
Exactly. Of course, every case is unique, but in general, papillary carcinoma has a very high survival rate, especially when it's caught early.
That's got to be a relief for people to hear. But even knowing that, if you were diagnosed with thyroid cancer, what are the typical treatment options? What can people expect?
Well, surgery is often the first line of defense.
Right.
Depending on the size and type of cancer, surgeons might remove part or all of the thyroid gland, and then in some cases, radioactive iodine therapy might be recommended.
What's that all about? Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It might sound intimidating, but it's actually a very targeted and effective treatment. Basically, you swallow a capsule or liquid that contains radioactive iodine, which then goes straight to any remaining thyroid cells in your body and destroys them.
So it's like a homing beacon for any lingering cancer cells. That's pretty incredible.
It is pretty amazing. And the best part, it has minimal side effects for most people because it's so targeted. It's not like traditional chemotherapy that can affect your whole body.
That's a huge plus, especially when you're already going through a lot. But even with all this information, I imagine a diagnosis like this can be overwhelming. What advice would you give someone who's feeling a little lost and scared?
Well, first and foremost, remember that you're not alone. Thyroid cancer is more common than you might think, and there are countless people out there who have walked this path and come out stronger on the other side. Don't be afraid to ask for support from loved ones, from medical professionals, even from online communities. Knowledge is power, and connecting with others who understand what you're going through can make a world of difference.
That's such important advice. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the thyroid, what are the key takeaways you hope listeners will walk away with today?
Well, first and foremost, this little butterfly-shaped gland in your neck, it's running a whole lot more than you might realize. It's influencing your energy, your mood, your metabolism, basically how you experience life every single day.
It's true.
And like any part of your body, it deserves your attention and care.
Absolutely. It's not something to ignore or take for granted. So if something feels off, if you're noticing those subtle symptoms we talked about, or if you just have this gut feeling that something's not quite right, don't hesitate to advocate for yourself. Talk to your doctor. Get those blood tests. And remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about your own body, the better equipped you are to make informed decisions about your health.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And even though we've covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of thyroid function to the complexities of thyroid cancer, remember, this is just the beginning of your journey. There's a whole world of information out there, and I encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.
And on that note, dear listeners, we've reached the end of our thyroid deep dive. Hopefully you're leaving today feeling empowered, informed, and maybe even a little bit more connected to this tiny but mighty gland that plays such a big role in your well-being. Until next time, stay curious, stay healthy, and keep exploring those fascinating worlds within you.